So I guess first, just a little bit of housekeeping. Go ahead and mute yourselves right now if you're in the meeting, please. It looks like everybody's joining us on a computer, so you can see this slideshow, but we are recording this so that folks can see it after the fact, or if they couldn't make it. This is the 4th public forum that we've had. So I'm Jess, I'm the Kress Pavilion Manager. On with us, we've got John Heller, our village president, and then Tom Strong, the interim village administrator. So I've created this presentation here for you. Feel free to, at the end of each section, I'll be pausing for questions. So the purpose of this meeting is just to give everyone kind of an overview of what the building's operations are. Hopefully some of you have you've all been to the building, and then also just kind of more information on the referendum. So as long as my slideshow cooperates here, we'll get it started. So first we're going to go over the programs in the building, and we're going to cover the facility budget, and then we'll go into the event packet rental rates with resident and non-resident. But when I say non-resident, I also mean taxpayer. So, and then the shortfall history, what a not to exceed referendum, what it means, and then we'll open it up for final questions at the end. So there are a few major functions of the building. First and foremost, we are a library building. So we have programs that are free and open to the public. We have building events that are for charge. I just wanted to show you this February calendar because last year at this time we were very busy. This year, obviously with COVID, we're kind of just pretty much virtually doing programs for the library. We are doing yoga classes, so that's a revenue stream that we've been able to keep. But typically, we've got all sorts of events. We've got book clubs every month. We've got movies in the Great Hall. We have paid events where folks rent out the space and actually charge for tickets. Since we opened, we've seen 126,000 library patrons. We've had 700 free and open to the public community events. And again, as I said, those range from family game day to Door County Children's Choir to movie night. And then we also have had 240 nonprofit events. We've had fundraisers for YMCA that they rent out the space and host fundraisers here. We've had help of Door County. We've also had concerts. We're one of the preferred venues for Peninsula Music Festival, for Midsummer's Music. So we're doing a ton of things here. And then obviously there are private events that we use the Great Hall for as a revenue stream. So just kind of wanted to give you an overview of the building. Essentially, municipalities across the county, they pay for their library building. So it's a similar situation in Egg Harbor where we have the library that uses the space at no cost. So I touched on that just a minute ago. Basically, it's more than a building. I get a lot of questions about, well, this is a library, or we're not paying for an event space. So the first floor is the library. The second floor is I guess you could say, the event space. We also have the maker space where we have community groups come in and host classes. We have businesses that rent the space, but we also have an abundance of library programs. So as I said, municipalities fund the building that houses the library at no cost. So just kind of giving you an overview of the things that the community can partake in here. We've got bingo typically every month with the Egg Harbor Historical Society, who also has a home at the Kress Pavilion. We've had the Folk Alliance group rent out the Great Hall for dances. We've had polka nights. Typically we have art classes that are for charge. We have concerts, some of them fundraisers. We had a couple of years where we did a fundraising concert in the Great Hall for the Kress. Obviously couldn't do that this year. We have fitness classes. We had the Door County Wellness Festival here. Obviously, we book club every month, and then story time. So we'll dive into the budget right away, unless anyone has any questions so far. Okay.
Feel free to, if you have a question, ask at any time. Unmute yourself, obviously, and ask a question.
Hi, it's Bobby. I have a quick question. Did you say that people are able to show movies and then they charge tickets for people to come and see it? Not you guys, but you have groups that do that?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are special cases where a nonprofit can get rights to a film and they can charge for tickets.
Okay, that's what I was worried about. Okay, good enough.
Yep.
Well, okay. and also the library system shows free movies, correct, Jess?
Free movies.
You can show it for free, but you can't charge unless you have. Okay, good enough. Thanks, Jess.
Yep, no problem.
Okay,
first I want to touch on the revenue side of things for the Kress Pavilion budget. All this information again is available on our website always. But wanted to just kind of walk through what our revenue streams are because they tie into some of our costs as well. So first up is the meetings and activity spaces. So this would speak to anyone that's coming in to rent the business center, the history room, or the maker space for a meeting. So this year we actually did, at the end of 2020, we actually did really well with our meeting spaces, just with all the folks having to work remotely. We were able to host them with Zoom, and obviously with internet being spotty up here, we actually ended the year really well, so 4,700. This year we're projecting that we'll end up in the $5,000 range, so that's the real area of growth that we've seen. As you can see, the Great Hall didn't bring in as much as we had originally projected. We were projecting to bring in 98,000 this past year, but ended up with 15,000. In a typical year, it's around 80,000. So we're really teed up to do a lot better this year, however, with COVID. So going into 2021, we're being conservative with our budget just because we're still feeling the effects of gathering limits. Right here, you'll see this line item's actually programs. So what these are is these are paid programs. These are our yoga classes. These are our art classes, things like that. Last year we took a big hit, a lot bigger than we anticipated. But this year we're still doing yoga classes. We're doing them COVID friendly with spaced yoga mats and masks. So we're hoping this number will increase again. So you'll see some discontinued items on here. When the village basically took on, removed the property management company and retained me, we just had to streamline some of our accounting systems. So you'll see that we used to divide everything up between food and fitness and yoga, but now we've rolled up all of our program revenue into the program line item. Other revenue, so this is where we kind of put all of our creative revenue. We charge clients for linen services if they want to source linens through us and provide them an upcharge. If clients need bartending services, we offer them bartending services and upcharge. If they need the room flipped, we upcharge them. So kind of the way that we've built the facility here is that people can kind of add extra opportunities for revenue. This year we're adding wedding day of wedding coordination. So be myself or another staff person that would do day of wedding coordination. So that's other revenue. You'll see our donations line item. So each year we get $3,500 from the town of Egg Harbor to go towards the building. And then last year you'll see, so 3,500 is the town share. And then we're aiming to bring in at least 10,000 in donations this year, just from various revenue streams. Our projected year end last year is 113,000, and that is because we were basically a donor sponsored a new generator for the building. So in the event of a complete power loss, the building can be a Red Cross site. So that's why you'll see that 113,000. That also includes the town's share that they pay us, and then just some smaller miscellaneous donations. This line item is transfer from other funds. So basically this is the transfer from the village's general fund that makes up the loss, so to balance it out. So any questions about revenues before we jump into expenses? Okay, so just to kind of go through, and again, this is all on our website, but just to kind of highlight some of the larger expenses that we have. Staffing is a large cost in the budget. The first one that you'll see here is the marketing and event assistant. So this line item is an individual that works at the village office for village projects, and then also at the Kress Pavilion. So we've essentially taken her compensation plus benefits and split it up so we can track it. She is basically responsible for helping to manage those, upwards of 31 weddings that we do every year, plus all of the private events, the other private events that we do. Originally, this was projected as someone that was part-time, and it was part-time seasonal, but what ended up happening was we couldn't keep anybody around. So that's why it was made into a part-time year-round position. And this you'll see is our public works staff and then a maintenance person, and their benefits. Basically, the way the village's budget works, if you're not familiar, is that if public works, works on the Kress Pavilion, then we have to line item out their retirement, their FICA, their health insurance, and dental insurance. So basically, when we were trying to figure out how we were going to do the maintenance of the building, it was more cost effective for us to do a maintenance person that worked 3 days a week, and versus hiring a cleaning company to come in every day. So the maintenance person is in charge of, doing a light clean of the building every day that they're here, and then also with various tasks. So that was previously under maintenance labor. Let's see, other big charges. So my salary is here. It's 53,000 plus benefits, and so that's obviously a big chunk of funds there. I'm primarily the person who's on call 100% of the time, and then obviously in the summer it's quite busy with all the events that we're doing. Before we skip to the next page, I just want to point out a couple of things that might seem or that are tied to revenues. So they're going to be variable costs. So coffee service, you'll see here. Basically what that is it's in non-COVID times, we have a pot of coffee that we have out. People can donate $1 or whatnot to that, to the coffee fund. We also offer coffee service as a upcharge for some of our corporate retreats that come in and other groups that need coffee. Programming. So this is directly tied to our programming revenue. This is yoga instructor payout. This is art instructor payout. That's what that is. Other variables that you'll see here on this page. So it's setup and takedown crew. So if there's an event where they need a room transition, we charge them an extra fee, and then the crew comes in and they basically, flip the room. We charge them a fee to do that. This is also, some weekends we'll have like 4 weddings or 4 big events in a row. This is staff to just help us transition that room. Also dependent on how many events that we have. And then moving on to the next line items. So, gas is a big one. This year was able to negotiate with AmeriGas for a $1.05 propane rate. So that was good. And obviously it's weather dependent as to how much that bill is. And then just pointing out a few more of the variable costs. So as I mentioned, linen services are something that we charge the clients for. We don't eat that cost. So this would be a variable cost that's rolled up into other revenue. Bar staff, same thing. With the Kress Pavilion, because we're a government building, people can bring in their own alcohol. We had looked at possibly getting our own license, but then that would prevent people from being able to bring a bottle of wine up onto the deck and watch the sunset. So we just figured community-wise, it wasn't a good idea to do that. So bar staff is for big events that need service. And again, we add a percentage on top of that. Catering supplies, that is, if they need us to source any biodegradable plates or cups or napkins, that sort of thing, again, there's an upcharge on that. And then, let's see, other ones here, credit card fees. So we do take credit card payments. And again, this number fluctuates depending on how many bookings we get. And then miscellaneous expense, you'll see 113 is what we spent in 2020. And that was related to the generator and then some other items that we had received donation funds towards. This year, we just put $2,500 in there just as a line item. So any questions on the expenses? John, is there anything I should point out or anything else that you think?
No, I think you're doing fine, Jess.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to pop out of here and I want to show you for those who aren't familiar with our event sales materials. Again, these are all on our website, so, or you can get copies of them. I can send them to you. So I wanted to just show you, when we were building these materials for the Kress, we looked at some different models around the state. One of them was Oconomowoc, which is probably the closest to what we are. There isn't really any other library facility that has event space that they rent out, but they have sort of like, it's like a rec center where they have like yoga classes and martial arts classes and things, and then they rent the top floor of their building. So this packet is more catered towards rentals that are not weddings. There's another book that I'll share in a minute that is weddings. And that is because when we started down this path, we weren't sure, should we charge weddings more? Well, it came down to the fact that there's a lot more staff time that's associated with wedding rentals. And there's just a lot more wear and tear on the building. So that's why we created a completely different packet with higher wedding rates. So just as we're going through here, wanted to point out a few things. So residents, they get to book as early as 24 months out. I know a lot of people wonder what they're going to be doing in 2 years, but we have had some clients who have, sons or daughters that are getting married and they want to book that date 2 years out. If you're a non-resident or a non-village taxpayer, then you have to wait until 18 months out. And just some definitions here, a resident is any individual who resides in the village and or pays taxes to the village of Egg Harbor. We do have some Village of Egg Harbor based organizations that, are nonprofits, basically get the resident rate or the nonprofit rate. Businesses, they'll be placed into either the non-resident or resident category based on the location of the business. And then nonprofits, civic groups, and charitable organizations do receive a lower rate. This just goes into the hours of operation. And then just describes the building. Obviously the library space is the primary use for the first floor. However, we do rent out the business center, the maker space, and the history center. So that's associated with that meeting and activity space line item. We do let folks rent the downstairs of the building, but then there's a premium that they have to pay outside of library hours. Most of our events happen up in the Great Hall. This just kind of gives an overview of, what they receive with the Great Hall rental, what's included, and also, how many people it can seat, that sort of thing. And then, other rental spaces, if they want to rent the entire building, they can do so for a premium. And they can also rent the lawn. We don't typically charge for the lawn unless they're bringing in a tent or they're putting chairs out there and they're really impeding the lawn. If they're just doing like lawn games, we don't charge people for that. And then here are the rates. So again, after talking with other community centers, we decided to do a per hour rate. For our weddings, we require a 6-hour minimum. And again, it's on a different rate structure. When we started down this path, our peak dates were a little bit different. This past year, we decided that peak was going to run from May 1st to October 31st. And then we were going to charge $75 an hour before too. Village of Egg Harbor business owners or residents, it's $50 an hour. And then if you're a non-resident, you get a flat fee on top. So it can be kind of confusing, but the way we did it this way so that people would really respect the fact that we have our library and community center and then the event space upstairs, and the two wouldn't really bleed together. And as you can see, after two, we put those hours at a premium because that's where we make most of our revenue. And then, lower cost on Fridays and Sundays, and then obviously during the week, lower still. And then meeting room rates. So this is for-profit groups, $20 an hour. Nonprofit groups, $10 an hour. We recently waived the $10 an hour fee for meeting rooms for residents and business owners and property taxpayers. Just because, we thought it was the right thing to do. This just goes into additional services. The coffee we source locally. We were gifted bistro tables and plates and wine glasses. So we charge for rental of those. And then also charge for linen rental, and then linen napkins. And one of the things that we added the last couple of years was meeting coordination. So in a lot of cases found that, someone's assistant or secretary plans the event, but they can't be there. So that was something that we added in the last couple of years where our staff will pick up food and that sort of thing. And then you'll see weddings here. I'll go into it in more detail in the next packet, but basically there it is. If you're a wedding, it's a 6-hour minimum. And then, there are additional hours that you can add on top of that. If they choose to rent the entire building, $750 during peak season, $500 during off-peak season. And then, the lawn, they can't rent it in the winter, obviously. well, I guess maybe they could. I've never had anyone ask me to hang out outside in the winter, but yeah. And then it touches on the $100 staff fee to flip the room. And then we just kind of get into the booking timeline, insurance requirements, cancellation. I just wanted to point out on here, we do have a Tuesday night community night for residents and taxpayers. We've had it since the beginning. We've had a few people take us up on it for potlucks and, a couple Christmas parties. And these are, if they're not charging anyone and it's, open to the residents, there's no cost to use the space. And then just it goes into our rules of food service and alcohol and cleaning and that sort of thing. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on the rental guidelines packet before I dive into the wedding rental book. Okay. So here are the weddings. So basically this just gives, again, folks an overview, but more catered towards wedding, what's included with their rental and what's not included. Obviously they need to bring in their own caterer. We don't do catering on site. Plates, utensils, and glassware, they're not included, but yet if they need to, they can source them through us. They can source linens through us. Day of planning services, we do recommend a number of the planners in Door County, but also we have our services available. So this is kind of the overview of the event space. And then our space is a little bit smaller than a lot of other places in the county in regards to event spaces. So this just shows how nimble the space is. So if people want to do their ceremony and their reception on site, how we kind of pull it off. And then the porches outside, we've had a number of ceremonies out there and cocktail hours and that sort of thing. And then it goes into the library downstairs. Obviously, they can't rent it during library hours. It's only after the library is closed. And then just goes over the outdoor space. And then the booking dates, which I shared with you, that 24 months in advance for Village of Egg Harbor residents and property owners, businesses. And then goes into food service and alcohol and all of our other policies. So what I was saying is it's a 6-hour rental minimum, and then they add hours on top of that. The typical wedding here is about 10 hours. So say they're having a 4 o'clock ceremony, they would rent starting at 2 because they rent when they start setting up. And then everything has to be done by 11. So music's off, people are starting to leave at 11, and then they have to be gone by midnight. So typically they'll rent that extra hour to clean up. So it ends up being 2 to midnight, 10 hours. So for a non-resident, it's about $4,200. And then, a little bit less expensive on a Friday or a Sunday. And the reason we did it that way was, again, so that we could be competitive with other venues. The thing that we don't have is some other venues, they'll charge like $5,000, and then you could come in as early as Thursday and then stay until Sunday. But we really want to keep the fact that we're a library first. We don't want people moving in on a Wednesday and then staying until Sunday. So that also helps us maximize our profits. So we're able to do, there have been weekends where we've done Friday, Saturday, Sunday events. To really maximize the space. And then, the additional services, and that's about it for the wedding rental book. Anyone have any questions about revenues? I did want to share that when we started our first year, it was about $1,500 for a 6-hour minimum. So now we're entering into season 4 and we're $3,000. But we kind of feel that this is probably the max that we're going to be able to charge people. Obviously, we evaluate that on an annual basis. But when we change our rates, it doesn't really impact the budget until sometimes 2 years out, just because people are booking so far in advance. So that's kind of one thing to consider too. Okay. All right, now we are going to get to the meat of it, shortfall. So we put this together just so people could see kind of where we were coming from with the shortfall numbers. Starting with the gross profit in 2018, obviously we're just getting our feet underneath us. And then 2019, 111,000. 2020 is where we took a huge hit with COVID. Yeah, with COVID. And then, you know, we've seen the more events we have, the more expenses that we incur. And so going into 2021, we're still being conservative, projecting about 115,000 in revenue with our expenses at 240, 520. And then, you know, starting to bounce back in 2022, keeping our expenses the same. We essentially, our wedding business is our biggest revenue driver. And that is, you know, 31 seems to be kind of the magic number for whatever reason, not 39 or not, you know, just for some reason, 31 weddings is kind of like where we've landed. So I usually use that as a pretty big barometer of how we're going to do. So I feel like we can keep our expenses the same or maybe fine tune them even more, but trying to bring those gross profit numbers up. So looking at 2022, because we raised our rates about 20%, we're looking at $114,000 shortfall. Obviously, that's 2 years out, but that would be the first year that this would impact, the referendum would impact the budget. So any questions about the shortfall?
I had one, Jess. I'm curious. Yeah. So as business increases, expenses increase as well, and I do get that. What I'm curious about is what types of expenses go up with the more business the Kress does.
Well, so one of the main expenses that went up was just staff. I mean, bringing on someone, initially it was myself doing all of the events and pulling some pretty long hours. And then just after talking with my committee, they just said, you know, it's not sustainable for you to be, you know, doing everything when we have these. So it was staff is a main component of expenses, but those other ones you'll see are variables. So
yeah, so Jess, some of the other variables are like janitorial service, which if the center is really cooking, could be as much as 10,000 a year, and if similar to this year, it'll probably be $1,000 a year. So that's one. What are some of the other ones?
Yeah, and I gotta imagine, John, and more activities that might take place in the wintertime, and I guess even in the summertime, in the evenings and so forth with the HVAC, that's going to be a big variable too. You know, it's like we've all, I think, talked when we talked about this in the past. It's, you know, you either increase revenue or you decrease expenses, and it's hard to do both. And trust me, I do understand that.
Right.
And it's like I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do to, I don't want to say offset it some more, you know what I mean? I mean, is it something as silly as, you know, when the Great Hall's not being used, do we make an investment at some point in, you know, some good quality blinds that can be lowered to help slow down the heat loss in the wintertime when the space isn't being used? Things like that, you know, to lower the propane costs, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, all those things should be, you know, any suggestions are obviously welcome. And so, you know, any way we can make the building more efficient is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Mac. There was a question that came in from Dave and Barbara Took. Has building depreciation been factored in? So I think, John, I don't know if you're aware, I don't believe that it has. That was a project that I know Ryan was working on, but I'm not sure. I think our accounting team, John, can you speak to that? I'm not really familiar.
Well, so can you get on and explain that a little bit more? Because I don't know how, a non-paying entity can utilize depreciation. A non-tax-paying entity can utilize depreciation.
I can answer that. Actually, yeah, depreciation is not taken into account as an expense against the current operating year. Basically, that's the way it is handled for all village property, right? Because there's no tax deduction involved. Basically, any of the community center and any of the other properties, depreciation isn't considered, except for the wastewater treatment plant, because that's its own entity. So it is correct. The numbers that you're seeing do not take depreciation into account for the income and expenses, but certainly the capital planning has been a point of discussion as we went towards a referendum.
And it was decided that that rather than, so let me just jump into the next page. So basically each year we're going to evaluate based on how many revenues or what a revenue projection is, exactly how much would be taken. So it's not to exceed 120,000. The village board basically batted around a couple other numbers because, if our HVAC system goes out, it's going to be $250,000 to replace the whole system. Will that happen all at once? No, likely not. But that was just like one of the major repairs. But then it was discussed that if we do have any extra money, we would put it into a fund to repair the building. But when we arrived at the 120 number, the trustees didn't want to factor that in. So, John, am I right in saying that?
Yes.